from the same university, and his master's and doctorate degrees in sociology from the National University of Singapore. The broad theme of his work is religious change with respect to youth, politics, and development. His scholarly writings have appeared in a number of edited volumes and, of course, in leading journals. In 2017, he was awarded as one of the outstanding young scientists in sociology. Let us all welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jail Cornelio, our first speaker. Dr. Cornelio, the screen is yours.
Hello, magandang umaga, Doc Rico. Mayong buntag sa atong tanan. Salamat for that introduction. I take it as a privilege to be speaking with many of our students, especially from senior high school. I understand that we also have many teachers in the house right now. So wherever you are, maayong buntag sa atong tanan. And I hope that our session today is going to be truly inspiring, gaya nga na sinabi ni National Scientist Pabelia. When the truth is not what it seems, my talk in the next 20 minutes is an invitation to you all to this exciting field called sociology. Ang layunin ko sa pagkatapos nito ay mahikayat kayo, magkaroon kayo ng intrigue or fascination with this thing called the sociological perspective. Pag-uusapan natin yan along the way, but I will be highlighting many issues na nakakaapekto sa ating lipunan. Ipapakita ko sa inyo that most of the time, how we analyze as ordinary quote-unquote people, issues do not necessarily reflect the underlying or mga root causes of many of these problems. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the very wisdom of the sociological perspective. Hindi siya commonsensical, hindi siya whatever people say. There is a systematic approach to understanding this. Ipapakita ko yan sa inyo isa-isa. Are you ready? Here we go. Let's do this. First things first, ladies and gentlemen, kaming mga sociologists, we are bothered by the world's wicked problems. So we don't just enter the classroom and we don't just enter our offices or we don't enter the world just asking, what do I want to study? Most of the time, and common ito sa mga nagma-masters at mga nagpi-PhD in sociology, meron kami mga hugot, mga sama ng loob, mga galit. It could, you name it, and most likely sociologists have written or researched about it. Poverty, yes. Inequality, yes. Conflict, yes. Peace building, yes. Estado ng mga kabataan, yes. Access to education, yes. And so on and so forth. We are obviously bothered by the world's wicked problems. Gusto nating maintindihan bilang mga sociologists, people who are trained to understand society, how these problems came about. Bakit ba tayo umabot sa ganito? And most of the time, the answers are very, very counterintuitive. So bakit ba natin gustong maintindihan? Precisely because we also want to make the world a better place. Pinapakita ko yan sa inyo ngayon sa inyong screen. We want to make the world a better place. What do we mean by that? Yung better, medyo complicated yan. Papasok dyan yung konsepto ng justice, progress, development, modernity, modernization. Some of you might be already familiar with these concepts or mga definitions na ito, pero there's a lot more that needs to be unpacked with these issues. So halimbawa, yung justice sa ibang tao ay hindi justice sa ibang grupo. Yung kapayapaan sa ibang grupo, hindi nangangahulugan ng kapayapaan sa ibang tao. Yung progreso ng ibang tao, hindi nangangahulugang progreso yun sa iba pang mga tao, lalo na ng mga marginalized sector. So again and again and again, sociology hopes to understand these complex issues, and hopefully by understanding the root causes, we can offer new paths, we can create new paths para matugunan ang mga problemang ito. Ready na ba kayo? Tatalakayin ko in the next couple of minutes mga iba't ibang mga issues that sociologists have discussed kasama ng aming mga cognate disciplines in the social sciences. Along the way, I will also be talking about my own research. Pero mas gusto ko na mas broad yung aking approach ngayon kasi tingin ko mas maraming mahihikayat pag pinag-usapan natin ng iba't ibang mga usapin that many of our young people today might relate with. Number one, ladies and gentlemen, before that, paano kami nanggagaling? Kasi ang point, saan kami nanggagaling? Ang point ng sociology, ladies and gentlemen, is that we want to understand personal troubles, yung mga pinagdadaanan mo bilang isang tao, hindi yan psychological problem lang. Hindi yan emotional problem mo lang. Hindi yan mental problem mo lang. Most of the time, ang sinasabi ng mga sociologists before I get to my issues, to my topics, ay konektado yan sa mga malalaking pangyayari sa ating lipunan. Ang tawag natin doon, social issues. Personal troubles, mga nararamdaman mo, depression, for example. Most of the time, ang tingin natin sa depression ay psychological, individual. Pero kapag maraming mga tao ang nagkakaroon ng depression or anxiety all at the same time, ang tanong ng sociologist, wait a minute, ano ang nangyayari sa paligid sa ating lipunan na nakaka-trigger ng mga anxious or depressive modes or experiences sa maraming mga tao? Anong tawag natin doon? Social issues. Trabaho natin bilang mga sociology students, trabaho natin bilang mga sociologists to understand ano yung link between what people experience and what society undergoes. Personal troubles, social issues. Pag malink natin yan, that's what we call the sociological imagination. So I'm sure yung mga students nutshell, what is the sociological imagination is the ability to relate personal troubles with social issues. Your personal individual story with the history of our society. Yan ang tinatawag na sociological perspective. Kaya challenging ang sociology. So i-apply natin itong sociological perspective nito in some issues. Let's go through them one by one. First is teenage pregnancy. May mga bali-balita, and totoo naman ito, ladies and gentlemen, and some of you might already be familiar with this story, or some of you might already be experiencing maybe in your own family or sa mga sarili niyong kaibigan, merong tinatawag na early pregnancy or teenage pregnancy. Ayon sa latest report, sa isang sa research mismo ng findings mismo ng Philippine Statistics Authority, apparently tumataas ang tinatawag na teenage pregnancy. So noong tumaas ito from 2018 to 2019 from 62,341 to 62,510. Tumataas ito, so up by 7%. Ngayon, itatanong ko sa inyo. Sige, some of you might be able to comment on this and it would be nice to see what you have to say, on this matter. Pero, ladies and gentlemen, karaniwan, ano ang sinasabi ng mga tao? Bakit nabubuntis ang isang teenager? Nabuntis ka kasi malandi ka. Nabuntis ka kasi pabaya ka. Nabuntis ka kasi hindi ka nag-aaral. So again, ang paninisi ay doon sa individual, personal story, morality, or personal disposition niya sa buhay. Pero kapag nakikita natin na may pattern, mukhang mas marami na ang tumataas, baka naman hindi lang yan usapin ng isang tao. So halimbawa, sabi ni Joshua Carl Elon, premarital sex, hindi ma-type ang ex, sorry po, or rape. Well, rape is another matter altogether. Pero totoo, Joshua, research shows na tumataas din ang incidence ng premarital sex. Pero paano natin i-sociologically i-analyze yan? Ang sabi ni Raj, yan ba ay dahil may lack of awareness sa sex education? Pag-isipan natin. Actually, pag in-analyze natin yung data, ladies and gentlemen, and this is why the truth is not always what it seems, makikita natin na, may pattern pala. Kapag mas less educated ang isang bata, especially of course, the female, mas less educated siya, halimbawa elementary lang ang natapos niya, mas mataas ang kanyang vulnerability sa teenage pregnancy. Mas educated ang isang bata, mas mababa ang teenage pregnancy. Doon pa lang makikita na natin na yung ating mga usual analysis na peer pressure, curiosity about sex. I mean, I respect all these opinions, nakikita ko po. Those are all important points, pero kapag inanalyze na natin yung datos, mukhang the truth is not what it seems. Tapos meron pang urban and rural divide, ladies and gentlemen. So pag naiintindihan na natin itong mga usapin na ito, baka yung interventions natin mas magiging sistematiko, mas magiging matalino, mas magiging malalim. So baka hindi awareness ang problema, kundi capacity building. Making sure that our students, especially our girls, finish high school, finish college. Sa intervention pa lang na yun, babagsak na agad ang teenage pregnancy. That's one issue for you. Another issue na gusto kong talakayin ay poverty. Naku, usong-uso po ito, ladies and gentlemen. Pinag-uusapan to ng mga ekonomista, pinag-uusapan to ng mga psychologists, orientations, and obviously kaming mga sociologists. Okay, ano ang karaniwang batayan natin ng poverty? Ang sagot, poverty incidence. So ipapakita ng mga reports, lalo na ng mga development banks like PBB or ng mga economists natin using poverty incidence as an indicator. Obviously, alam naman ng mga economists na problematic din yung konsepto ng poverty incidence, but be that as it may, yan naman parati ang nare-report. Tumaas ang naghihirap sa Pilipinas. Objective indicator, poverty incidence. Ano yung poverty incidence? This is the rate of the population who fall below the poverty threshold. Okay, ano ba yung poverty threshold? So merong indicators na ginagamit ng Philippine Statistics Authority at normally nasa around 10,000 pesos yan a month for a family of 5 para matugunan yung pangangailangan ng mga tao. Dahil sa pandemic, tumaas ang ating poverty incidence from 16% thereabouts, before the pandemic, pumalo ulit tayo sa 20% or thereabouts. Okay, great. Good analysis, tumaas tayo. Ang sasabihin ng mga more sociologically inclined ay it's one thing to analyze poverty using poverty incidence, but it's another thing to ask people, do you feel poor? Dito papasok yung tinatawag na self-rated poverty. Ang president ng SWS ay si Academician Mahar Mangahas, kasama natin siya dito sa NAST. And I really consider him one of my inspirations, and we have worked together in a couple of projects. Ako bilang isang fellow din ng SWS. At ang kagandahan sa ginagawa ng SWS, hindi nila tinitingnan yung poverty incidence, tinitingnan nila yung sa loobin ng mga tao. Sa palagay mo ba, naghirap ka? And ladies and gentlemen, obviously, mas maraming mga Pilipino ang magsasabi na mahirap sila. Look at the first line of that report. At least 48% of Filipino families feel that they are poor. Pumababa na ito over time, pero again, tumaas in the recent years. Again, pwede pa nating i-disaggregate itong data natin. Sino sa Pilipinas ang mas naghihirap, feeling nila mahirap sila using survey data? Sagot, apparently mga kapatid, akong mga higala dira sa Visayas ug Mindanao, apparently ang atong mga Bisaya at atong mga taga Mindanao, kayo ang mga mas mataas ang self-rated poverty. So makikita natin dito, and from the time of Cory Aquino all the way to President Duterte, every quarter nagkakaroon ng nataas baba, makikita niyo. Pero pag tinignan niyo yung annual averages, actually pababa. In the past 4 years, medyo tumataas ulit in terms of annual average. Pero kung i-disaggregate natin according to data, ang NCR 45% lang ang self-rated poverty. National average is 48, pero Mindanao 54. Visayas 60%. So sino ang tinamaan ng pandemic much worse? Obviously, Visayas and Mindanao. And then you can obviously disaggregate that even at a more granular level, municipalities, cities, towns, barangays, and so forth. I leave it up to you para ma-inspire kayo sa bagay na ito. Okay, now, may mga nakikita na ako tanong, pero siguro mamaya sasagutin natin yan sa open forum. Why do people why do people feel poor, for example? Last, okay, I have a few minutes remaining. Ito, usong-uso ngayon, youth and the elections. Isa akong sociologist of youth. isa yan sa expertise ko. And usong-uso ngayon yung tinatawag na hashtag ready to vote. So last weekend, sina Robbie Domingo, nag-launch sila, no, sina McCoy, Dubs, no, sila, yung mga celebrity influencers, nag-launch sila sa social media ng Love Kita Pinas, no, voters registration event. Ang point nila is that they want to encourage, especially the young people, to vote. According to the COMELEC, Commission on Elections, we are expecting at least 4 million first-time voters. Pag idagdag mo pa yung mga na-deactivate, papalo na 7 million yung mga new voters sa 2022. So, pero kung first-time voters, ang ating mga senior high school students, maybe some of you are already 18 years old, you are already eligible to register and therefore to vote. Ang sinasabi nila ay kailangan mahikayat natin ang mga kabataan, para bumoto sila at baguhin yung takbo ng ating gobyerno at ayusin ang lahat. And most of the time, however, ang tingin ko, and I offer this as a humble reflection, mukhang hindi nagmamatch. Kasi, bakit? Okay? Ito, papasok na dito yung aking research. It's not that young people don't want to vote per se. Hindi yun yung issue eh. Last year, I edited this book for the University of Santo Tomas Publishing House. Na-publish na po yan. Available na po yan kung gusto nyo po. Nasa Lazada po yan or Shopee. Hindi naman sa nagpo-promote, pero it's a really good book. It's a collection of different chapters written by social scientists from around the Philippines talking about different issues ng mga kabataan. Nag-focus kami sa millennial, pero applicable ang issues na ito sa realidad ng marami pang kabataan, especially the younger ones. Ngayon, ang isa sa mga arguments namin dito is that young people are not apathetic. They're not necessarily not concerned about the Philippines or about our elections. Their main issue is that, bakit pa ako boboto? Wala naman pakialam sa akin ang gobyerno. Bakit pa ako boboto? Kasi wala naman akong, ano man ang sabihin ko dyan, hindi naman ako papakinggan. So on and so forth. Ang tawag dyan sa sociology of youth ay political disillusionment. Political disillusionment. So, kahit ikayatin natin ng kabataan na Pilipino na bumoto or mag-register, pero kung nararamdaman niya na sayang lang yung effort ko dyan dahil hindi naman ako papakinggan ng pamahalaan, then it begs the question, maybe there are other ways to encourage our young people to participate. Ang evidence ko po dito ay yung ating sangguniang kabataan. It is obviously our political platform for young people to participate, pero ilan lang ang tumatakbo. And research shows that most of the time, ang mga sangguniang kabataan ay infiltrated ng mga pamilya or ng mga political dynasties. So again, kung ordinaryo ako na kabataan, bakit ako sasali sa SK? Puro sila-sila lang naman yun. Again, the truth is not what it seems. There are so many other ways to talk about these issues, pero I leave you now with this quote, right? The function of sociology, as of every science, is to reveal that which is hidden. The function of sociology, as of every science, is to reveal that which is hidden. Ang panalangin ko ay sa pamamagitan ng ating sociological analysis, mas mauunawaan natin ang kalagayan ng ating bansa, and hopefully we can solve our problems better. I end here, and hopefully we will have a better, good conversation in the open forum. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cornelius, for that very energetic presentation. Salamat kayo. Well, for our virtual audience, if you have questions, can you take note of those? And we'll entertain them later during our open forum. And for the Zoom participants, of course, feel free to key it in our question box. Also, please don't forget to promote our talk to more people. And of course, use the hashtags, hashtag MYS, hashtag BExcited, and hashtag Pilipinas in your social media accounts. Okay, we'll now move to our next resource person. Our next speaker holds an Aboitiz Chair in Data Science and is recognized for his pioneering contribution to social science research using data science. He is an educator, entrepreneur, and a leading scientist whose leadership has been pivotal in the successful launch and implementation of the first data science program in the Philippines. He's also the founding member and the first and only industry-facing advanced analytics laboratory in complexity science and data science here in the country. He has successfully collaborated with experts from other fields to provide informed policy options in addressing critical issues such as the development of smart cities. The team, under his leadership, has implemented artificial intelligence algorithms and has deployed decision support platforms to successfully tackle real-world problems that span across domains from urban science, finance, healthcare, and even to manufacturing, to really name a few. He obtained his PhD and MS in physics and BS Applied Physics from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Let us all welcome our next speaker, academician Christopher Monterola. Sir?
Hi, thank you so much, Rico. Can you allow me to share my screen, please? Okay, there. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Rico, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, sir. We can see it, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, Rico. And thank you, Dr. Cornelio, for that wonderful presentation. Maraming salamat po. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. My name is Chris Monterola. And for my presentation today, I will be tackling on three things. The first one is the science of data. And how is this related to some of the things that Dr. Cornelio mentioned kanina sa talk niya. A good portion of my presentation will be the applications of this in government and industry. At the end of the day, lahat po ng ginagawa natin sa industry and government, it deals with people, human being, tao. No? At pagdating sa gobyerno, it is how to impact their lives. Pagdating sa industry, how to make their lives better. And finally, very briefly po, i-introduce ko sa inyo yung recently launched na National AI Roadmap kung saan kasama namin sa mga tumulong sa pagkagawa nito si National Scientist Raul Pabella. Okay po, let me start with this particular component, Industry 4.0 and the science of data. Ano po ba ang mga puwersa na nararamdaman ng buong mundo ngayon, especially pagdating sa education ninyo, especially pagdating sa papaano hinuhubog ang iba't ibang individual na nabubuhay sa panahon na ito. And my argument po is that it is actually based on the following technological trends. One, we are producing a lot of data because we are producing a lot of smart devices. We talk of smartphones, smart cities, smart cars. And at the end, at the middle of all this is what the so-called sensors. Sensors that are producing a lot of data. Ganito po nagre-react ang mga tao. Sa loob ng isang segundo, about 9,400 tweets are being sent. This is on March 14, data na nakolekta ko noong March 14, 2021. About 113 gigabytes of internet traffic is produced. More than 90,000 Google searches produced. 3 million emails sent, isang segundo. In one day, the total amount of emails sent is more than 129 billion. 18 times po greater than the total population of the world. No? Marami dyan, of course, ay spam mail. And in the last few years, a greatest source of both the energy consumption and pollution are actually not mechanical devices, kundi pagkuha ng information. Sa loob ng isang araw, 2 milyong smartphones po ang nabebenta. And we use electricity, dahil nga among others itong tinatawag na Bitcoin, ng more than 2.1 million megawatt hour ang nagagamit natin sa energy. And there are more, we are using more energy in getting information than actually using it for mechanical purposes. Because of this, we are now in an era where the total amount of data in the last 2 decades, nakikita natin that they refer to this as data deluge. Every 2 to 3 years, we multiply the amount of data that we have by 9 to 10 times. Or another way of looking at this is that the total amount of data that we have now, 90% of them is produced in the last 2 to 3 years. The combination of this producing a lot of data. So marami po sa inyo siguro na mga teachers, especially alam pa itong mga devices na to, no? In 1981, we have this 1/4 floppy drive disk. It can store 1.4 megabyte of information. Pero ang magandang balita, marami tayong napuproduce na data at itong mga data na to nai-store na rin. No? It is common now to see a 2 terabyte hard disk, something that you can bring anywhere. And this is 1.4 million times compared to the size of the data hard drive that we have in the 80s and in the 90s. And at the same time, the amount of data, the cost of storing this data becomes cheaper and cheaper. In 1970s, para makapag-store ka po ng 1 megabyte of data, kailangan mong gumastos ng 1 million USD. Ngayon, 10 to the negative 5 USD or nag-decrease ang presyo ng 10 to the 11 or 1 followed by 11 zeros. Ganon kalaki. Exponentially, nagmumura. Exponentially, lumalaki ang kaya nating i-store na data. And exponentially, bumibilis din ang mga ginagamit nating pang-crunch ng data. You are looking here at the first supercomputer that was first housed in NASA, created by IBM. The cost of this is $6 million US. The dimension of this is it's bigger than a bus, and the weight of this is 30 tons. An old model of iPhone 7 will allow you to do 25 billion operations per second. Typically, we need 2 to 3 seconds to perform an addition or a subtraction. No? This is 5,000 times faster than that. But an iPhone 7 can do 25 billion of such operation in 1 second. And that is a factor of 5 million compared to the supercomputer shown here. Now, this is the point of the so-called Industry 4.0. We are producing a lot of data that can now be stored, and the powerful computers can crunch this information. So that ideas, paradigms, business models, and innovation is not just happening. They are accelerating. They are accelerating. At ito po ang challenge sa generation ng mga gagraduate ngayon. Habang ang lifespan natin, except for this year, continuously nag-i-increase, ang haba na pwedeng mag-stay ang isang company, the lifespan of a company decreased significantly because of disruption. In 1937, S&P 500 companies, these are the top 500 companies in the US, based in the, it's mostly international companies based on market capitalization, can stay afloat for 75 years. Ngayon po, it can only stay for 12 to 15 years. Which means, okay, if you do the mathematics and there are 40 years ng buhay ninyo, na mabubuhay kayo, about 3 to 4 jobs ang kailangan ninyong hanapin, not because you want to move from one job to another, but because you have to, because this company might not be afloat within your life. And one of the things that influences significantly this transformation is artificial intelligence, or AI. In 2017, they forecasted that by 2022, the total impact of artificial intelligence on offerings and processes will be about 60%. 2021 now, the number is actually 70%. And they made another forecast in 2019, put it at 93%, which is, I think, a very meaningful forecast. No? In fact, the technology with the greatest impact, because it tries to understand human behavior, it helps in human behavior, is AI. Artificial intelligence. This is the so-called ABC of technology in innovation. And that A is artificial intelligence, the other B and C is blockchain technology and cloud computing. But 70% of the changes that we expect will happen in the industry is driven by artificial intelligence. It is expected to add up to $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030. But I think the more interesting number is $92 billion uplift to the Philippine GDP. This is about 12% of the GDP that is expected to happen in 2030. Ganito po ang potential ng impact ng artificial intelligence kahit sa Pilipinas. No? Having said this, okay, ipapakita ko po ang iba't ibang data science applications sa government and industry in the next 5 to 7 minutes. Gusto ko lang pong sabihin na at the end, at the core of both the industry and government agencies are people. Kailangan nating maintindihan ano ang gusto ng tao, ano ang aspirations ng tao. That is the purpose of both the industry and the government, to understand people. And now we have a better way of understanding this because of data. We now know how people are connected. We know that you can see China and Russia is not here because they do not have Facebook. We have a better understanding of how people interact with existing institutions. You are seeing here the data of the people withdrawing ATMs in Barcelona. So makikita natin paano, nasaan ang wealth, nasaan ang pera, nasaan gumagalaw ang mga tao sa kahit na anong panahon. We have a better understanding of how people are moving. So we are seeing here the flow of people in UK airport, no? And especially during the pandemic, because of these contact tracing apps, we know more precisely where the people are at any point in time. And what are the movement of people will tell you about their level of aspirations. And because of this, we now have a better understanding of how diseases, gossips, and information propagate. The pandemic that we are experiencing now, in terms of spreading, is actually way less compared to what happened in the 1910, the Spanish flu, 1906, 1910 Spanish flu, and it's precisely because of our better understanding of the movement of people. We now have a better understanding of the nature of human because of this data, and we do not need to make a hypothesis. Dr. Cornelius pointed this out. Sometimes the truth is not what it seems. And you don't not creating a hypothesis, being driven by the data that you have and understanding that different culture, different constraints play a role in the movement of people, in the behavior of people. Okay, that is one thing that artificial intelligence and data science can help. And it's exactly precisely because of this, I will now be showing some of the artificial intelligence applications as seen in government and industries. So this is based on some of the projects that we have done with different industries. But before that, let me mention again this, that 70+% of innovation, and this is all about value creation for the people, is driven by data science and an entrepreneurship mindset. I'm not making this up. In fact, if you try to look at the most innovative companies globally, okay, Google, Amazon, Netflix, DBS, Apple, LinkedIn, Facebook, they are driven by someone who understands data and at the same time has a better understanding of human behavior. These are entrepreneurs who drive their understanding of human behavior by looking at data. Page and Brin, Bezos, mamaya sa open forum po, I can discuss paano nila pinalaki ang kanilang company, ano ang vision nila, anong na-realize nila na meron ng tao na hindi ganun yung ini-imagine natin. Again, conformity with Dr. Cornelius' earlier points. And in fact, data literacy and data science becomes one of the driving force sa economic hiring, especially during the pandemic. October last year po, ang data scientist is now in the Philippines more valued than doctors and lawyers. Sila na may pinakamalaking sweldo, and this trend is not just true in the Philippines, but this trend is also true globally. So this is the world that we are living in, looking at data. Examples po, this is a work that we've done with Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. As you all know, it's a regulatory body and their main purpose is to actually regulate more than 500 financial institutions every month. They do this by looking at the checklist, more than 2,000 records, and they will be spending 40 man-hours per record and multiply that by 500, that will be equivalent to 20,000 man-hours. Through AI, data science, and network science, we reduce this amount of time to just 11 minutes. That is a 99.99% reduction in process. This is a work that we've done with Manila Water. The problem here is to forecast water level of Angat Dam, which supplies more than 90% of the water level in Metro Manila. Previously, they can do this in 2 weeks, but now we can do this in 6 months. So as you can see, hindi na po tayo masyado nagkakaroon ng water shortage nito sa Angat Dam kasi pag matagal ang kaya mong i-forecast, kaya mong maggawa ng intervention. Pag kulang ang tubig, ang magic number po ng Angat Dam is 180 to 220 meters. Pag kulang ng tubig at walang ulan, there will be water shortage. And if the water level is too high and there's a lot of rainfall, okay, we can lose lives because of the flash flood. So ito po yung reason why do you want to forecast this way ahead of time. This is a work that we've done with one of the bigger agri company in the country. And their problem is to forecast spoilates. No? We help them using artificial intelligence. They have more than 60 territories. They covered more than 60 territories with more than 300 products. And by simply understanding the supply and demand, ano kailan bumibili ang mga tao ng pagkain ng kanilang mga hayop, at sa mga iba't ibang area, tanong nagti-trigger dito, we were able to reduce spoilates o yung spoilates of the different animal feeds by about 100 million. Another work that we've done, and this is again interesting, ang idea ng psychology ng tao, no? Machine-human interaction. This company, one of the biggest multinational company in the country, in fact, their device is present in more than 90%. In one specific device is more than present into more than 90% of the population globally. One of their biggest problem is understanding machine and human interaction. They bought machines that can cost up to $500,000 per machine, and they have hundreds of that machine. But the greatest source of disruption is the interaction of machine and human. So we try to understand this, and for just 10 products, and they have hundreds of products, we were able to save them 75 million. Okay, again, using data. How actually humans behave at different times of the days, for example, and how do they interact with machine. Another problem is human capacity. Okay, this is very important during this time, understanding how long will an individual stay in a hospital. Importante po ito lalo na ngayon na kinukulang tayo sa capacity dahil sa pandemic. We work with one of the biggest Asian pharmaceutical company who owns at the same time several hospitals. And yes, this is quite recent. No, this is a work that we've done in maintindihan po natin ma-lessen ang spread ng pandemic na COVID-19. Sabi nga nila ang isa sa weakest link ng response natin sa Pilipinas is yung tinatawag na contact tracing. But here we not only identify those individuals who are vulnerable to COVID-19, but at the same time those who are super spreaders. You may potential na maging super spreader. At ang total number po ng kayang impluwensyahan ng super spreader is actually 1,000 times greater than a regular spreader. So kailangan nating ma-pinpoint kung sino itong mga super spreader na to. So using data science and AI, we can actually understand this individual. And this was launched in 4 cities already in Metro Manila. In education, no, it is transforming the way we do things. Ito po yung mga iba sa mga naging partners namin, and this is for capstone ng mga estudyante. And we were able to give them $40 million annual improvement in revenue. Ang nagsasabi po ng number na to is actually the C-level executives, the CFO specifically of these different companies. Pinapasok na rin niya ang tungkol sa art. Isa po ito sa pwede niyong gawin with artificial intelligence. Painting ni Amor Solo, mukha ko, pwedeng pagsamahin at pwede pong paglaruan yung mga ganyan. No? Or automation on coloring. So naapektuhan na po nito paano tayo gumagawa ng mga artworks natin sa school, or even video. Automatic video creation. Inaasahan po natin na itong mga ito ay magiging natural na sa bayan natin, sa education natin, to have artificial intelligence in that. And yes, the data science is now changing even companies. You are seeing here one of the biggest conglomerate in the country, the Ayala Group. And you are looking here at all the business units, heads. This is in their MANCOM meeting. Nasa likod ko po ang currently naging presidente na ng BPI, si TG Limcao ko. And dito si Jasa, ang head ng Globe, si Ernest ko. Ang sinasabi ko lang po sa picture na to, ang mga geeks na tumitingin sa data, pinapakinggan po ngayon ng maraming tao sa industry. And finally, I would like to end my presentation by mentioning about the National AI Roadmap. At this point in time, there is nothing that I can imagine where artificial intelligence applications is not felt. Lahat po ng bagay nagkakaroon na ng nalalagyan ng AI na iintindihan natin ng maraming bagay at mas magiging magandang gamit natin sa mga bagay na ito dahil sa artificial intelligence. In fact, while previously government sees the strength of the army or oil as their nation-defining capability, at the current time, AI is the one that defines one's nation's capability. And because of this why we have created the National AI Roadmap led by that BTI. Magkaroon po tayo ng idea paano magkakaroon ng access sa data, sa infrastructure, computer resources ang bawat isa sa Pilipinas. Mga high schools, elementary, etc. Paano po mangyayari yon? So, isa po tayo sa top 50 na country sa buong mundo na nagkaroon ng ganitong klase ng roadmap. No? And sinimulan po natin ito noong November 2019. Nilance po natin ito actually a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And ito po yung ilan sa mga strategic tasks. You can download this idea, but it has 4 dimensions. Maggawa ng mas mabuting infrastructure, intindihin ang regulation, dito lalong papasok ang mga social scientists, ang ethics ng artificial intelligence, ang research and development, and of course, yung tinatawag natin na workforce development. Kailangan nating maintindihan ano yung mga dapat nating i-target na individual na magbe-benefit ang ating mga kababayan pagdating sa AI. At ang isa sa center po ng roadmap na ito is a creation of an NCARE that will be funded by a good portion of which will be funded by the private sector, not the public sector. So NCARE stands for National Center for AI Research. At malaking-malaki po ang importansya dito ng mga social scientists. Dahil again, at the end of the day, this is all about people. When you talk of smart city, it's all about people. When you talk of smart university, it's about understanding the aspirations of our students. The center of anything, public, private, and anything is all about people. And unfortunately, Newton's first law, naintindahan natin ang pinakamaliit, ang pinakamalayo, ang pinakamalaki, pero ang pinakamahirap maintindihan ay ang ating sarili, no? Kaya kong buhatin ang phone na to, kaya kong buhatin ng ibang tao, pero hindi nyo kayang buhatin ng inyong sarili. You can only impact the people, you can only understand, and the greatest wisdom normally is understanding human nature. 2 of the Nobel laureates in the last 5 years in economics is actually about this, no? Yung tinatawag na behavioral economics, Thaler and Kahneman, understanding human nature. So ito po yung mga kasama natin sa mga nakausap natin na ilan dito sa National AI Roadmap, kasama si National Scientist Pabella. At ito po ay galing sa iba't ibang agency led by DTI. No, lahat ng agency nakikita natin dito, DOF, DOST, DepEd, TESDA, DOLE, etc. Well, with that, again, maraming salamat po. Thank you so much, Rico.
Academician Monterola, thank you very much. It was very comprehensive report. Like you really emphasized the value of data science and of course artificial intelligence, and also the very wide projects that you apply those concepts. So we'll discuss more about it in a little while. Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is a full professor and the former dean of the College of Forestry and Natural Resources of UP Los Baños. He also holds the highest rank of UP Scientist 3 since 2011 in recognition of his scholarly outputs and international scientific standing. He was a 4-time visiting professor at the University of Tokyo and a visiting scholar at the Waseda University, also in Tokyo, Japan. He is also the regional coordinator for Asia of the International Association for the Study of the Commons. He is a recipient or a co-recipient of the numerous national and international awards, and foremost of which was his contribution to the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize Award, shared by the members of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This one is with former US Vice President Al Gore. He earned his PhD degree in Geographical Sciences from the Australian National University. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome our next speaker, academician Juan Pulhin. Sir John, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Rico, and good morning to everyone. This morning, I will be sharing probably one of the least appreciated and talked about topic. I decided not to talk on climate change, which is really at the heart of my work, but on my first love, which is actually forestry. Because many years back, I earned my Bachelor of Science in Forestry, and probably some of our young minds may not even uh, understand or may not even know that there is such the science and practice of forestry. So essentially, my focus is the contribution of social science in the field of forestry. And the outline of my talk will include five aspects. One is very quickly showing the importance of forest ecosystems. Then I'll move to science and practice of forestry. I call here traditional versus social forestry, the role of social forestry in sustainable forest management, which is in support of the Millennium Ecosystem goals, and also a final slide on my take-home message. Let me start by saying that the world has a total forest area of 4.06 billion hectares, which is actually 31% of the total land area of 13 billion hectares. Forest ecosystems provides valuable products and services that are key to human well-being and the survival of humankind. In terms of livelihood and income, close to 1.6 billion people, or more than 25% of the world's population, rely on forest resources for livelihoods. And most of them, actually 1.2 billion, use trees on farms to generate food and cash. Moreover, many countries in the world, particularly in the developing world, draw on fuel wood to meet as much as 90% of their energy requirements. Of course, we are more familiar with with the role of wood and timber in human civilization. We said in forestry, from cradle to grave, we use wood and timber. But in addition to that, a significant portion of the people in the world use energy, particularly fuel wood, and in fact, more than 90% in general of their energy requirements come from trees and the forests. Our students may also be familiar with the ecosystem services that the forests provide, such as we are aware of the so-called biodiversity and essentially probably future cure to cancer and other diseases may actually be at the heart of the tropical forests. And there are actually 18 mega-diverse countries of the world where two-thirds of the Earth's biodiversity can be found. And the good news is the Philippines belong to those mega-diverse countries or 18 mega-diverse countries of the world. And essentially, these countries contain two-thirds of the Earth's biodiversity. Between 70 to 80% of the plant and animal species in the world can be found just in these areas. We are also aware with the advent of climate change, and this is really the area that I'm working on, that forest ecosystems sequester carbon from the atmosphere, and therefore we called it as carbon sink. So they store carbon and therefore contribute to climate change mitigation. Clean air and water quality, forest has the capacity to purify air and water as well. And so it also belongs to the forest ecosystem services. Natural calamities and disaster can also be prevented or help prevented uh, in terms of the ability of the forest to, in a way, absorb excessive water or runoff, but at the same time to serve as shelter belt, including mangrove areas in terms of typhoons and other forms of disasters. Of course, forests provide cultural services as well in terms of recreation, cultural values, spirituality, and so on. So these are just some of the many important things that are contributed by forests that contributes to human survival. In the Philippines, it is important to note that in fact, 53% of our total land area are classified as forest lands. In other words, this has been declared by the Philippine government to be solely dedicated for forest lands, for growing trees, and in order to promote both the products and the different ecosystem services that I have mentioned earlier. The rest are so-called alienable and disposable land, which include private lands, agricultural lands, lands for settlement, and so on and so forth. Now, as I've mentioned, probably many of our young attendees to this webinar may not be aware that there is the so-called forestry science. And the science of forestry really aims to develop knowledge for the effective protection, management of the forests to provide the required products and ecological services for the benefit of the society. And this is where the social dimensions of forest management comes in. And we have forestry as a profession, and in fact, this is uh, uh, there is the official recognition of forestry as a profession. So we take foresters board examination, and as a profession, forestry embraces the science and art as well as the practice of creating, managing, using, and conserving forests and related resources for human benefits in a sustainable manner to meet desired goals, needs, and values. So this is according to Helms on the Dictionary of Forestry, and really at the heart of the forestry profession. Now, quickly, let me mention that we have the so-called traditional forestry. That's the old paradigm of forestry. And when I was doing my Bachelor of Science in Forestry, we are still under this particular paradigm, which focuses mainly on the technical aspects, biophysical, but have essentially equated, in the context particularly of the Philippines, forestry in terms of timber exploitation, that is logging for economic development and profit maximization. No? So on the one hand, the emphasis on trees and forest resources exploitation has really provide more access to the relatively elite sector of the society to enjoy the benefits of the forest resources, whereas on the other hand, the forest-dependent communities were marginalized, and in fact, in my term, in fact, criminalized as the culprits for forest destruction, because earlier policies in forestry have put the blaming fingers to the local communities as the culprit of forest destruction. No? So this is the trend in the Philippine forest land allocation and forest cover change. As you can see in here, this is, well, at the earlier, when the Spanish conquered the Philippines, essentially 90% of the total land area of the country, around more than 28 or 29 million hectares, are still covered with forest vegetation. Through time, particularly post-World War II, it went down significantly to 6.2 million hectares. And it's worth emphasizing the fact that particularly in 1959 to 1960s, and I want to highlight this, more than 30% of the world export of logs available in the international market came from the Philippines alone. And I again repeat, more than 30% of the world export of logs available in the international market came from the Philippine forest alone. No? And that has essentially resulted to massive land degradation, but also dissemination of our forests to our current level. No? What is interesting, though, is in terms of allocation of forest land, particularly during the martial law period, where more than 10 million of the 30 million hectares of the total land area was actually allocated to 170 or so logging concessionaires. We call them timber license agreements. So they are the more monetized, politically connected elite that apply for timber concessions. And during that time, a single timber concessionaire can actually have as much as, just for one concession, as much as 99,000 hectares of public forest land under his care, primarily for exploitation. So essentially, that's what had happened, where more than, again, during the martial law years, where more than 30%, 30% of the total land area of the country was actually under the hands of these concessionaires. And as a result of that, you can see the parallel trend, the strong correlation between elite control and also the degradation of the country's forest resources. And therefore, in the new constitution, the principle of social justice demanded that there should be more attention to be given to the forest-related needs of local communities, and hence the emergence of what we call now as the community-based forest management. I captured a little of it in terms of this graph here. This is now the area under community-based forest management. And as the areas in community forest management increases, correspondingly, you can see also that there is a subsequent increase in terms of forest cover in the country. So, and hence the birth of social forestry, not only in the Philippines, but in many parts of the world. And I'm glad to say that we are at the forefront of advancing the science and practice of social forestry in the Philippines. So when we talk about social forestry, it's an alternative form of forest management that balances the needs of the local people with multiple external interests. It considers local people as key partners in forest management while also advancing social equity and justice. No? That the local communities who are dependent on the forest for their livelihood and survival also should have access and benefits from the forest resources. Social forestry as a science uses social science disciplines such as sociology in terms of understanding human behavior and the broader structural context that shapes what happen or do not happen in the forestry sector, anthropology in terms of culture, forest interaction, and understanding them, political science in terms of governance of forest resources, demography in terms of forest-dependent communities, economics in terms of allocation of resources, particularly to the less marginalized sector, to the more marginalized sector, and other branches of social science. First, in terms of understanding forestry issues, but also in terms of managing forests sustainably. And above this, social forestry also asks the question, for whom should forestry be? So it is important, social forestry privilege the role of local communities in forest management. This points out to the importance of local communities, which include, among others, the following. Local communities have greater stake in forest protection and conservation since they depend on the forest for livelihood and survival. They have access to forest benefits by the poor, providing access to forest benefits by the poorest of the poor, that is the forest-dependent communities, will also help alleviate poverty and address social inequity in the society. And also, local communities possess a storehouse of indigenous and local knowledge, it should be possessed, and experience as well as which are valuable for sustainable forest management. If you look at the world and the forest resources which are intact all over the world, including the Philippines, chances are that those intact forests are actually under the management of local communities, particularly the indigenous peoples group. So we argue here that social forestry is at the heart of what is now called a sustainable forest management. When we talk about sustainable forest management, we want to meet the forest-related needs of the present and also of the future generation. So we talk about what is called here as intra and intergenerational equity. So sustainable forest management is the overall goal of modern forestry, and social forestry is at the heart of the pillars of sustainable forest management, namely sociocultural. We need to understand the sociocultural context and the needs, as well as the culture-forest interaction, particularly of the forest-dependent communities, so that their culture, but as well as their livelihood, may continue to be sustained through time. Social forestry is also at the heart of understanding resource allocation in forestry and privileging the more marginalized sector in the process. And the last of the three pillars, social forestry is at the heart of sustainable forest management because the rich indigenous knowledge and practices are actually, when incorporated to modern science, can essentially confront the challenges of environmental degradation in many parts of the tropical forests. So my take-home message are the following. Forests provide multiple goods and services that are key to human well-being and survival. Traditional forestry science focused on technical aspects, neglecting the role of local people and communities in forest management. And finally, sustainable forest management can only be achieved by thinking beyond the trees. And this is the title of my presentation. And incorporating the social dimensions in the science and practice of forestry. Let me end by a quotation from Jacques Tovey, who is the acclaimed international architect of forestry, who once said in 1967, forestry is not about trees. It is about people. It is only about trees insofar as trees meet the needs of the people. Good morning and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Academician Pulhin. So to each and every one of us, please let us give a round of applause or a virtual applause to our speakers. Now at this point, we will now proceed to the, but before that, as you can see, in response to the call to action of President Azanza earlier and National Scientist Pabelia, our presentations, the three presenters actually laid out very good dimensions of the importance of social science. Earlier, we have Dr. Cornelio really inviting us about the importance of sociology. And then we also have Academician Monterola really explaining to us the importance of data science, but emphasizing the importance of appreciating human dimension of such an effort. And then also we have Academician Pulhin, who also talked about the human dimension of forest conservation. Well, there are a number of questions actually. So very quickly, we wanted to have two rounds, okay? First are questions related to your presentation. Then hopefully we'll have time to also discuss about social science and how it can then really encourage our young people here to also invest a career on these disciplines. So maybe first, let's start with Dr. Cornelio. There's specific questions, really more about pregnancies. Very interesting. Yes, very interesting questions. But I think the question is really more about the use of the sociological lens in understanding these social issues. But the questions was more on the pregnancies. But perhaps you can elaborate more about the question, why is it that when there was a promotion of
sex education,
sex education, it was perceived to be more about promoting teenage pregnancy? As a sociologist, sir, what can you, how can we respond to this concern?
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's a great question, no, Dr. Rico. The reality is that teenage pregnancy is still causing a lot of moral panic sa ating lahat for one reason or another. You know, it could be religious, but it could also be a threat, di ba, sa pamilya na parang once my daughter becomes pregnant, you know, ahead of her time, then it will destroy her future. So moral panic operates at so many levels. And so when we and the fear is that the more educated they are about sex, the more inclined they are to do it. But research shows around the world that sex education never fosters sexual behavior. Again, research around the world shows that sex education does not lead to an increase in sexual behavior. Most of the time, ladies and gentlemen, sexual behaviors are learned by our young people. And if you remember when you were younger, much younger, you learned about sex through your friends and and especially now through social media. The point of sex education is to prepare our students to, number one, say no. And two, if they can't say no, at the very least, be prepared for what they can do and maybe the consequences as well. If we could insist on these points in our sex education programs, then I think it would allay many people's fears.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Cornelio. The other questions, actually, we received lots of questions for you, academician Monterola, really more on the utility of artificial intelligence. Most of the questions that were asked really pointed about, will this contribute to job creation, or will people lose jobs because of artificial intelligence? How do we strike the balance of these aspects? Or
Thank you so much for that. Actually, we have a research specifically on the percentages of jobs that can be automated in the Philippines based on all the jobs that is available currently in the country. And indeed, there will be jobs that will be compromised as a result of this. That is one of the point of the National AI Roadmap, to make sure that those jobs who are compromised, they will be able to find another option, okay? And they can be upskilled so that they will have an improvement in the way they do things. There are three specific components that I would like. There are three specific jobs where AI, we imagine AI can eventually help them. For one, agriculture. I think we mentioned in
there was a question
that there are about 30% of our workers are in the agriculture sector. And definitely precision agriculture using AI, predicting the weather, knowing what crops to plant, understanding when do you need to plant this so that pag inani mo siya, maximize yung profit na pwede mong makuha. Those are the things that obviously can be solved by AI. No, importante po ito na gawin natin kasi 30% ng workers natin contribute to only 10% of the economy. That is why they are a marginalized sector kasi our GDP per capita in the average is 3,000 USD. 150,000 pesos po ang earnings ng mga household natin in the average. But for those in the agricultural sector, 1/3 lang nun ang iniuuwi nila, no, compare sa ibang sector. Malaki ang uplift sa economy pag nadagdag natin ng AI sa agriculture, and two other sectors na immediate din po yung magiging impact pag tinulungan natin silang mag-upskill will be the BPO, where we have more than 1 million individuals in that component, and the second is yung mga nurses natin at saka mga seamen, where 25% of the world population is coming from us. Pag nalagay po ang data literacy sa mga skill ng nurses natin at saka BPO workers, we will be able to even increase their income. So in general po, ito ang general na trend. Mas marami actually ang pwedeng ma-produce na trabaho sa AI kaysa sa pwede niyang mawala na trabaho. Okay. So basta ang kailangan natin is planuhin properly pagdating sa aspect na ito. And that is the point of the National AI Roadmap.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Thank you.
Point well taken, Academician Monterola. Sir John, you've mentioned about Philippines being one of the 18 mega-diverse countries, but one comment, there are a number of environmental issues that might result to species extinction. Is this a concern? Is there a possibility of Philippines being removed from the list? Sir John.
That's a very good question. Thank you so much for that. And yes, it's a major concern. Because out of the 18 mega-diverse countries of the world, there are only 2 countries that are also considered mega-diverse on the one hand, but also a biodiversity hotspot. And that includes, unfortunately, Philippines, and the other one is Madagascar. And essentially, it's really, I hope we will not be removed on that 18 mega diverse countries, but we really need concerted effort, no? Yeah. Not only from the government, but from the citizens as well. And this is why we are promoting the social dimensions of biodiversity conservation, because at the end of the day, we cannot erect fence, we cannot shoot people entering the forest. We talk about social fence in terms of really guarding the forest, but not really only guarding, but also managing it so that it will be more mutually, I would say, beneficial both for the society and also for the local communities.
Yeah.
And that's why we are talking about social forestry here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We don't have much time though, but very quickly, we received lots of questions, and we hope to send this to you, and perhaps in another opportunity we'll be able to answer. But it would be a remiss on my part if we want to sort of wrap this up in a way that would really hit the purpose of our activity today. Inspired by your line of work, and now we're talking to the Filipino youth. How do you see the future of the social science as a discipline in the country, and therefore encourage the young people to really invest a career on social sciences? Maybe let's start with Dr. Cornelius, sir. Very short answer. Pasensya na po kayo, ha? But Dr. Cornelio.
Young people in the house, if you are bothered by the problems that we have right now as a country, this is the best time to pursue any field in the social sciences. We need you. And I believe that many of you are really concerned, judging by the questions that I've been seeing. Too bad we can't answer all of them. You are obviously bothered by every problem that you can think of. I hope and pray that you will pursue the social sciences, whether it's social forestry or data science or sociology or anthropology or whatever. As long as you are doing it because you want to make a difference in our country, let's work together. The social sciences, we do have some answers, and most of the time they are really good answers.
Okay. Well said, Dr. Cornelio. Perhaps you can share your email later so they can contact you. Yeah. Academician Monterola.
Okay, yes, from my end, it's really look at data driven. This is the time when we can look at data to really understand how human behaves. And note that the behavior of human, hindi pwede po natin maikahon. No? Depende siya sa environment, depende siya sa culture, depende siya sa maraming factors. And this data will tell us the story. Do not start with a hypothesis because chances are those hypotheses are driven by your biases. There are more than 1,000 biases that makes one hypothesis less true compared to other. Drive it with data, and I think this is a very exciting field, especially moving forward, because at the end of the day, everything, as I mentioned a while ago, will be about human. It will be about the citizens, their aspirations for smart nations. It will be about the students for smart universities. All the smart devices are intended to be of use to human. Thank you.
Thank you also, Academician Monterola. Academician Pulhin, please.
The future, not only the present, can actually be shaped depending on our commitment. And I believe that social science is at the core of shaping our future. You know? We can unpack a lot of issues, but at the same time, we can offer lots of solutions to make this world a better place to live on. And I believe at the heart of it is the social science. So I hope that you really pursue social sciences in your work or as your own profession. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Academician Pulhin. Well, that wraps up our very, very short open forum. Thank you very much to our speakers. If in case, of course, we saw that there are a number of those questions that need answers, you can then resend those to salinlahi@nast.dost.gov.ph or send it to the social media account of NAST. Okay. There is actually a video presentation also about the Philippine Science Heritage Center developed virtual tour app and a Mango survey about the exhibit shown in the PSHC. Okay. But will we show it now? Do we still have time? Or maybe what we can do, we can visit the. Okay, there you go.